standstill or a plateau, but the demand is increasing. I would like to think that demand for coffee is inelastic. That means it will be bought and it will be demanded regardless of some prices that it will come through. But we are not far from the mark if we say that. In the Philippines, it's sad that we actually are decreasing in production of coffee. And that is also much an issue because our population of coffee drinkers, particularly of the younger generation, is really increasing. And if you would see the imports of coffee, mainly Coffea Robusta, for the soluble coffee market is actually very high from my graph. The price of producing coffee is high, yield per hectare is low here compared to other countries, and therefore farmers are losing interest. However, with the resurgence of Coffea Liberica production, maybe, we are slowly hoping to make a game-changing thing for our coffee industry. So Coffea Liberica is a rare coffee. It's grown in only 5 countries. These are Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Ethiopia, and the Philippines, mainly for local consumption. Although some have exported the emerging specialty coffee industry, surprisingly, C. Liberica comprises a large part of what's being cultivated in Malaysia, and I'm sure Kenny and Raven will be telling you more about that. The World Checklist of Vascular Plants recognizes 3 species of coffee: Arabica, which is originating from hybridization of Eugenioides and Canephora, which is actually Robusta, and Coffea liberica, which are 2 infraspecies, Coffea liberica liberica, which we call here Barako, and another one, Coffea liberica deverai, which we call Excelsa commercially. So Liberica is well known to the coffee growing places, but it is referred to as an heirloom species in the Western world. And maybe in Australia, it's even called heritage variety. Not many have experimented roasting the species given the limited availability, maybe 1%, 2% of total production around the world. And that's why the work that's being done in Malaysia is very interesting because they would have a little bit more coffee to play around with. Liberica is characterized as having fruity, woody taste similar to jackfruit with bitter top notes. That's very different from the sweet, fruity, and slightly acidic profile of Arabica. So just a picture, this is a 1 peso coin in the Philippines. The Liberica trees are taller with larger leaves, making harvesting more difficult. The cherries are much bigger than the Arabica or Canephora, resulting in less production per tree, and that was maybe the reason why it was of less interest. However, we also recognize that the SH3 gene, which is known to be responsible, the family of genes responsible for disease resistance, has actually been studied in Liberica. So this presentation will provide you some of the insights of the work we've been doing in the Philippines and where we're going from here. You see the bitter, earthy character of Coffea Liberica has found its way into the instant and soluble coffee market, and we call it Barako, which means strong, loosely translated tough, masculine, bold, fearless. Barako is also the colloquial name for stud in the Spanish term for wild boar. The term is associated with characteristics of fearlessness, masculinity, and toughness. These characters are apparently also associated with people in the province of Batangas, where this is mainly cultivated. The area is also famous for another quality product, and that's the switchblade. So the neighboring Cavite province will not be outdone, claiming Coffea Liberica as their product. Both Batangas and Cavite are historical coffee centers in the Philippines. Coffea Liberica farmers and the farms are just found 2 to 4 hours away from the main capital in Manila, which then also threatens their production because they may be part of the area that will be sprawling because of Manila, and therefore their land becomes more valuable for things like suburbs and subdivision. So there are distinct differences between the leaves, the morphological characters, as seen by Dr. Buot and Dr. Miriam Baltasar. And however, though the varieties differ, that for Liberica and Liberica deverai are still very much overlapping. So there has been, that paper has not really established differences in species between them, and they remain as infraspecies. So you'd see the Liberica leaves over here. They're kind of much bigger, almost 2 to 3 times larger than what we have here for the other species, Arabica and Canephora. The other thing is in both Cavite and Batangas, the resilience, the farmers will attest to the resilience of the species uh, because of the long exposure to the sun and erratic periods of drought. They believe that the tough leaf lamina, though they are wider, the infraspecies have reduced loss of moisture through transpiration because of the upward orientation. If you would see the second tree up there and the last one, that's Liberica, both are Liberica species, Excelsa and Liberica liberica. So the moisture transpiration is reduced because of the upward orientation of the leaves. And then the root system of C. liberica are also longer, almost 2 if not 3 times as long as that for Canephora. And the seedlings provide them with deeper access to water in times of drought and reduced rainfall. So this paper, which came out last year, I think, was really very exciting for us because we started working on I started working on Caffea liberica sometime in 2016, 17, and this just gave us the impetus to continue working on the species because of the idea that the reemergence of Leucomerica as a major crop plant because of the changing climate was something that was necessary. Back then, the major issues were variety identification and the availability of juveniles or seedlings that have been authenticated. So one of the things that we tried to look across the different varieties, basically Liberica, Liberica deverai, Canephora, and Arabica, was to compare the sensorial coffee quality affected by volatile or non-volatile compounds. So the accumulation of caffeine, chlorogenic acid, trigonelline, and sucrose in green beans as affected by environmental factors, altitude, shade, moisture, also by processing and by variety. What is important there are the polyphenols, which are recognized as antioxidants, which have beneficial properties against stress, aging, and related diseases such as cardiovascular disease and cancer. Caffeine, chlorogenic acid, diterpenes, and trigonelline are some of these polyphenols. What we found out is that the highest trigonelline content was observed in both infraspecies Liberica liberica and Liberica deverai, followed by Canephora and then by Arabica. The same study also compared trigonelline content across different sites from the same variety of coffee. The results indicate differences in trigonelline were observed across C. arabica, but in different environments. But for Canephora and Liberica, they were a little bit tighter together, particularly Liberica, maybe because also of the limited area in which it's being observed. So what we can get from this is that it seems like variety and genetics might be of greater importance in terms of the polyphenols we want to look at, as opposed to Arabica, which also is highly affected by the environment. So here is the data for the content. Liberica will have the highest, trigonelline, Arabica the lowest, and Robusta very close to Liberica. So we did using SNP markers also from resequencing of 12 Canephora genomes and 2 Liberica genomes. We just wanted to do a representative sampling of variety of the whole genome. And we did find area-based, or we would say these are cultivar-based varieties, because the ones with the FRTs are actually productions from Nestle. And the others up here are the local varieties that have been grown by local farmers. So you could see Cavite, which is also Batangas, having quite different makeup for their Canephora. However, Liberica and Excelsa do separate very clearly, and between them, there will be representative sampling of genes in the SNP markers, thus separate the two varieties. So we are hopeful for the ability to actually separate the two, and definitely between that and Canefera. So variability, size, and color. Let's now go to within Liberica itself. So Coffea liberica and Coffea liberica deverbrai. Variability in size and color of Liberica cherries is very high, as you can see from the pictures on the left. This range from light red and yellow to bright and deep red, almost black, the one on the top hand. The thick exocarp is also a good indication of resilience to rising temperatures and drought. The green beans are smaller for Liberica deverbrai or excelsa than liberica or what we call liberica, and it has less of an elongated shape. Previous research has demonstrated that the length of the minor radial axis of the bean is the characteristics which differentiates C. liberica deverbrai from either a similar sized Canephora or Arabica and that of Liberica liberica. So we did a multi-characteristic study and did a principal component analysis on coffee bean morphometrics. And C. liberica in 6 different farms in the Philippines over here, you'd see the yellow and purple circles. Although many would actually come together and there is much overlap, there is still a very big distinction between the purple and yellow circles. And these are apparently the deverbrai and liberica. So morphologically, we are hopeful that we will find clear markers that will separate them. Although definitely by practice, we can also see, depending on how much you see or are able to view of these different beans. I want to put up here another comparison between deverbrai and liberica for the total DNA, total protein, caffeine, and CGA using spectrophotometry. This is a colorimetric approach to the concentration of the material on the bean. And we would see here that deverbrai will have a little bit more protein and higher CGA content, but generally it would basically be the same for both of these two beans. We have the data for Arabica and Robusta as well. But I guess the issue would always be what kind of bean do we have? Variety is now very important, as we've seen here. So another approach we tried to do for this study was to actually predict where would be the best places to plant liberica. We have very limited data yet on liberica because the main areas that are producing it are here, Cavite and Batangas, and that's Metro Manila over here. But we tried to use our model against Arabica here and Canephora, and indeed we were getting good validation for the model because it does predict where most of the farms that are actually raising these varieties are found. So we are hopeful that with more sampling of liberica, we will be able to try and establish the suitable places for the movement of the variety in our country. This is a maximum entropy model for using 20-year data at a resolution of 1 kilometer per pixel on our graph. So to do this, we basically look into where they exist, derive a model that will try to predict those places where they existed, and then run it through the bigger universe of the area and find pixels based on the model where the conditions will be basically the same as those where the current growth areas are. So we are moving more on this and helping our partners to actually be able to use this in the future. So moving forward, where are we going? I have really been working with Liberica from 2016 or 17, and that's why we want to push this more, knowing that it will be an answer to many of the issues in the coffee industry, especially if we are able to increase the production in lieu of climate change. So one of the first things that we did was actually establish the Wonders of Philippine Coffee Museum, so that when somebody enters a room, you look at the pictures, you look at the information, you read through the material, and you will find out more about what Liberica is, where Liberica fits in the whole landscape of coffee, of the coffee industry in a region. So this is one we started in Cavite, which the Cavite State University, I was able to organize with them a grant under the RTI Stride program, and we built that room over here, and you would see this over here, and this over the boxes are actually museum curations of existing mother trees. So we taught them. Thankfully, we have a very good botanist and museum curator in our university, and we involved her in trying to teach the local university how to press and curate and the information that is needed like a museum. And this is what they have right now out there for their mother trees and for those that they will eventually encounter in the area. Much is not known about that. We hope to have something else in Batangas and where else there will be a good production of or interest in Liberica. The other thing we're doing is this. We're also trying to curate representative, mostly Mat K, because we want technology that could be passed on to local universities. Mat K sequences of Liberica varieties, as well as Canephora and Arabica, mainly from the web and from those who have been working on Arabica and Canephora. Those abound. But the ones for Liberica, we want to make a standard tree, if that's possible, so that it will reduce the need for training and the need for equipment from our partners and other individuals that are interested in this. And they can get their sequences and then try to shoot it in the tree that we're making with the reference sequences to just try to evaluate the validity of their samples, so that we can also help the Department of Agriculture's efforts to really multiply the species for production. So here is one of the posters. If I were there, I would have brought some for you. This is a big poster, a 2x3 poster, which we distribute across the different areas. It has our maps. It has the varieties and the characteristics that one could be looking for at the moment. By the way, these are funded by the following groups: the Cavite State University here, the Center for the RTI, USAID, and CCI, Center for Conservation Innovations, which was helping us with the maps. And these were our initial maps. And finally, two more things. We have this. We're developing a farmer-friendly tissue culture method for coffee. And I could have also brought a poster like this, and we'd show you how we've actually moved forward with trying to put down the technology that is required for tissue culture of coffee, so that it might be in the hands of people who want to do this in mass, in less technically trained and equipped conditions. So we were replacing some of the tissue culture stuff with easily available kitchen stuff, and we actually have, if you would see here, successful growth of our coffee. And the last thing I forgot to add here, we hope to do a whole genome sequencing of Liberica. I don't know how else, but we'll be happy to help anybody who would like to do the genome sequencing of Liberica, for indeed we will need beyond immediate resampling of SNPs markers. So with that, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to actually be with you, though remotely, and we'll be open to any questions. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Carmen. I hope you heard the applause from the audience. Very exciting presentation. And perhaps allow me first one question from myself. Is it possible to use your models for the Philippines to other countries to predict for other coffee growing countries where Liberica cultivation might be possible?
I would think so, but it will really depend on where they have Liberica already, or not. Because if they do have Liberica, it would be, we have the model. You can have, it was trained using our data where we know it existed and where we know it exists. Like, that's why that's very small. I would show you that picture. That's why it's still tiny in its scope. But as we move forward, we can add more data points and see how the trees actually do well or not well in certain areas. And yes, sure, it's going to be, it can be made available.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from the audience? Yes?
Hi, Dr. Carmen. I'm Raven. Good to see you again. So sad to see you in person. My talk is right after you, so I'm really interested in what you mentioned just now about how the volatile and non-volatile compounds affect sensory of Liberica. There was a study for not just Liberica, but cross species. And also you mentioned the trigonolin being higher in Liberica and the hybrids of Libericas. I'm just wondering, what were the results like in terms of the sensory aspect? Because my talk is right after you, and that's what I'm interested as well. Yeah.
I didn't drink the coffee, sorry. No, I maybe the point here would be, I think each country, maybe Malaysia, maybe Indonesia, or maybe area, like, when you're talking about single source coffee, might have a different comparison between Robusta, Arabica, Liberica, and Liberica Liverite. Because the literature will tell us that there will be higher in Arabica, in the material that came from Africa, compared to Liberica and then Robusta. So, Arabica greater than Liberica, greater than Robusta. For us, it was Liberica greater than Robusta, greater than Arabica. So I think, your areas in the sensory part of that might find a correlation here. It's not like it's one size fits all for all the different areas.
I see.
So what would be nice is for you to taste your coffee and then look into the profile and see if there would actually be a correlation between the two.
Thank you. Yeah, that's
and if you're only looking at three, and there's so many things, right? So, but if you can find one or two markers that can help, and this is spectrophotometry, so it's colorimetric. It's not that difficult.
Ah, I see. Thank you. It's just this very limited material that connects the chemical compounds in the different proportions and across species and varieties with the sensorial aspect. Like this very little, really little studies, I couldn't find any. But obviously I'm not from a researcher background, so maybe I'm limited in that aspect.
And it's only one compound from all the thousands of compounds that are in coffee. And it also shows, your example well shows that never believe the literature, especially the very old literature, which was sometimes made with very, very unspecific methods.
Yes. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other? Yes, Christoph.
Thank you. Hi, Carmen. This is Christophe Montagnon. So thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering, have you started a breeding program on Liberica? Yes.
Right. My university is in the center of Manila, so we don't really have that. If there's anybody who will be doing that, it will be the partner universities. But I have been helping the University of Batangas, the Batangas and Cavite. This is what, it's very close to their heart, this species. That's why it's alive, because otherwise it would not have been there anymore. Now I'm working with the Batangas State University, and they have had initially just a grant to produce 100,000 seedlings for distribution to the farmers. And their very first question to me is this Liberica? Because the area has been planted beforehand with contract growing for Nestle of Canefera. And there are some in the literature that actually show some hybridization between Canefera and Liberica. So there is no breeding program, just to answer that question yet. But what we need is characterization at a large scale also, just to, That's why I want that tiny little. I'm trying to figure out a small little program. I put all the Liberica I have there. I put all the Canephora in the Philippines and all the Arabica in the Philippines. And then our partner can basically do their own amplification sequencing. And now you can just send samples and the sequence come to you. And that the program will shoot where their sample is in that system. You see what I mean? Just to help them make sure that what they're propagating in the hundreds of thousands is actually a Liberica.
Okay, just one note. Actually, I'm doing that. So if you need some genotyping of those, let's keep in touch. But I mean, that was not the purpose of my question, actually. But interesting if you can go for.
If you can do it in an app and give it to somebody else, it'd be great, wouldn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Nice. That's good to know. Who's this again, please? I'll send you an email.
We will connect you afterwards. I think you have the email from the proceedings, probably.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
We have very short questions, 1 minute left. I was asked by the organizers to better stick with the time frame. Please.
Okay.
Go on. Yes.
Hello. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a very short question. Do you think that can Liberica be better adapted to the weather change than Robusta guana? This is one question because we are believing that Robusta can have the option as a sustainable stuff because we are finding sensorially very acceptable varieties under these species, and probably the Arabica is not the only one, and they require very specific agronomic conditions. But what happened with Liberica is better adapted than Arabica and Robusta, or what else? Thank you.
Just structurally, given the if you can look, if you can. I've seen a lot of Liberica growing and Robusta, and I could actually see the root system difference. But yes, I agree. There are Robusta varieties or Robusta accessions, if you would call that have lasted even the coffee rust in the Philippines. And there are 100-year-old trees somewhere up there in the Kalinga area. So I agree. We should not give up on Robusta, particularly that there is a very big industry already running that, and you have all the resources for it. I think, though, that Liberica has been found in some places that were rather strange, like, for example, a little bit more saltier, salt inundated areas in the lower regions. I've seen 2 Libericas there, and I was going like, what's this doing here? So yeah, we don't know a lot about this. And if you think of investment on something that's already known versus something that we still don't know about, I would agree. We might want to go into breeding programs for Robusta and look for the fine quality Robusta as well, because Liberica is such an unknown. But on the other hand, with the interest, for example, in my country, Robusta is, unless you're in the Mindanao area, it's not a very winning proposition. We might actually move towards Liberica based on economics rather than just adaptability.
Okay, thank you so much for your answers, and I would like to stop here now out of time reasons and ask the audience to send you the rest of the questions by email. Your email address is in the proceedings book. So Carmen, thank you so much again for joining us here by Zoom. And we will now go on with the rest of the program. And the next speaker is Rafe Sun Kwok, who gives, yes, thank you again.
Thank you so much.